Hi, my name is Ellie Dashwood. Today we'll be talking about 5 words you need to know to be able to better understand Pride and Prejudice. So maybe recently you've been reading this, or maybe you've been watching this, or my favorite, maybe you've been watching this. Whatever the case, you may have come across some words that don't sound super familiar to modern ears. Or maybe they do sound super familiar, but the people in the movie or in the book are using them in ways you do not understand. So let's go over 5 common words in Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen's other works that sort of have either a different meaning today or we just don't use it all anymore. The first one is fortnight. You come across this pretty soon in Pride and Prejudice when the ball where they meet Mr. Darcy is in a fortnight. And what is a fortnight? It is 14 days or 2 weeks. And that was a pretty common amount of time you would give someone if you were going to invite them to a ball. I wish people would invite me to a ball. If you're having a ball, like a Regency ball, please invite me to this ball. And I wouldn't even care if it's only in a fortnight. The second is handsome. Now we all understand that men are handsome, especially Mr. Darcy. However, what about all the women they keep calling handsome? I mean, if a guy walked up to me and was like, "You're handsome," I'd be like, "Are you saying I look like a guy?" Well, at least that is what I would do if I didn't obsessively watch period dramas where all the women are handsome. And the answer is, during this time period, handsome just essentially meant beautiful, pretty, good looking. It was an equal opportunity word. Women could be handsome just like men, and it was a compliment. So if a Regency man ever walks up to you and says you were quite handsome, take it as a compliment. Also be like, did you come through a time machine, or are you just wearing that costume for the fun of it? Recently, my uncle watched this drama, and now he goes around saying the women are handsome about all the movies. It's like, oh, there's handsome women in that movie. And I'm just like, seriously, Uncle Ray, you're just gonna start calling all the women handsome now that you saw Pride and Prejudice once? 3, engagement. Now, there's a scene in this version of Pride and Prejudice where Charlotte Lucas tells Lizzie that she's engaged to somebody, because you can't have spoilers of who Charlotte Lucas is gonna marry in this movie. And she says, "I'm engaged," and Lizzie responds with like, "To be married?" And she's like, "What other kind of engagement is there, Lizzie?" In Pride and Prejudice, there are a lot of type of engagements. In fact, the word engagement was used for several different things. It could be engaged to be married. It could also mean you had an engagement, sort of like an appointment. I have an engagement for dinner with my friend over there. I have an engagement with my doctor. I have a speaking engagement. And it also could mean that someone has asked you to dance later. Because back in this time at the ball that you should be inviting me to, please, there was, essentially they would carry around cards depending on the ball, and you would write down who was asking for what dance. Like, so some guy could come up to you and be like, "Can I engage you for the second dance?" And you'd be like, "Yes, you may have that second dance." And so you'd be engaged for a dance. So there's so many different types of engagement and engagements. So if someone says they're engaged to somebody, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are going to marry them. They might just be having dinner with them or giving them a second dance at the ball. The 4th word is cousin. Now, you may have noticed there's a lot of cousins in Jane Austen's world, and the answer is they're not all technical cousins. At least in modern terms in America, we think of cousin as in like, hey, that's my aunt's kid. But no, it could be, in Regency England, it could be like your half-brother's wife's younger brother, which I guess we would call our sister-in-law's brother, but they would call that guy their cousin. And so when someone in a Jane Austen movie says someone's their cousin, don't just assume that they're literally their cousin, but it could just be through marriage, or like even Mr. Collins is not their first cousin, he's like their second cousin once removed or something. And so cousin does not always mean cousin in Pride and Prejudice. 5, connection. Now, connection is sort of related to cousin. It has to do with your family and who you're related to and who your family's related to and who they've married. It's essentially your broader family social network. And this was very important in marriage and who you knew. And it's a social status thing, which is why in Pride and Prejudice, especially you see it in this one, when Miss Bingley's like, "Oh, their connections are horrible." They're talking about the fact that Lizzie and Jane and them, their relatives are not high ranking, they're not rich. And the higher connections you have, or essentially the higher socially ranking your relatives are, the more sort of socially appealing you are. Because if Mr. Darcy married somebody whose aunt was the queen, that's way better than marrying someone or whose mother is Mrs. Bennet. Mrs. Bennet is a very low connection to marry into. So essentially, connections were the people you're related to. It's like a currency almost, connections were. Like, even if you were poor but you had really good connections, that was a plus. But if you were poor and you had bad connections, that's no good. And if you were rich and you had bad connections, even that was sort of choppy, because you had a lot of like nouveau rich, or people who were newly rich, maybe through trade or through the Navy, and they weren't of family, aka they did not have well-to-do family names and relatives that went back for hundreds of years, and so that was not very good for them. So those were our 5 words for today. We have fortnight, handsome, engagement, cousin, and connection. I hope these words will help you better understand Jane Austen's works, especially Pride and Prejudice, the next time you read or watch them. And I hope you have a great day. Please subscribe to my channel for more awesome videos about Jane Austen and classic literature, and let me know if you have any questions you'd like me to feature on my Dashie Notes episode where I answer modern day questions about classic literature. Have an awesome day.